And we're live. What's up, everybody? We got a 20 questions today, and actually a new topic we haven't touched on. Normally, we do 20 questions between Israelis and Palestinians. One time we did an Israeli and a Lebanese, but today we're doing a Jew and a Muslim. This is a community inspired 20 questions. Both Natan and Zishan are community members who decided they want to do a 20 questions, and here they are doing it. As with much of our content, a lot of it really has come from the community. So this is a perfect example of that. Before we get started, just some formalities. If you're new here, please like and subscribe. We do live streaming every week on different topics, but primarily the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Our goal is to reconcile between people in conflict. A big shout out to our Patreon and Visionary members. We have Trivium Energy Pty Ltd, SOG Cannabis, Max Marine, Geffen Posner, Adam Becker, Maya, and our one and only champion member, Rajia. If you want to become a patron or support the show, you can find information in the description. All and any support is greatly appreciated. To those joining us for the live session, let's keep the chat respectful, as always. And that's it. Natan, Zishan, it's great to have you both here. I'm going to leave you to it. If you need anything, you know where to find me. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to this one. Enjoy, friends.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. So, my name is Zishan. I live in Chicago, next to a heavy Jewish community area. I was born in Pakistan, but then moved to United Arab Emirates, and then as a teenager moved here to the States. And I've been living here ever since. I spent majority of my time, the most number of years I've ever spent in the country was here, actually here in the Midwest region. And from the background perspective, my education, my undergrad and my master's, they're both in computer science. So my day job is leading a team of software developers and building a fleet management software. Now you guys must be thinking, where does the conflict Palestine Israel come into play? So on from a passion perspective, what I like to do is I like to travel. I do have my own YouTube channel, but I haven't been posting much over there. ZNH travel, but travel has been on hold. So I've been to 20 plus countries, and last year I was actually planning on going to Israel. I had the plane ticket and everything planned out, but that fell through. But I mean, living here in the States, you meet a lot of people from the Jewish faith and a lot of Palestinians. So I've learned a lot in my journey. And then, as I started watching and hearing folks on YouTube, in the news outlet, etc., and when I came to know about Adar, I joined the community, and I was really interested in contributing. And to the community, and if there's anything that you guys can learn from me, or if I can answer any questions, I'd love to. But like I said, I'm here from an educational perspective, seen and heard a lot about the conflict from both sides, and like I said, I'm looking forward to my discussion with Nathan.
And hi, I'm Natan. I'm born and raised in New York City on occupied Lenape and Canarsie land. Education-wise, I started out in wilderness expedition science. So that's a combination of biology, uh, travel safety, wilderness first responder and first aid certification. And then I moved into yoga teaching and became a yoga teacher in New York City public schools for a few years. And now I currently live in India, uh, south of Chennai, south of the city Chennai / Madras, depending on what era. And my approach or my reason for being involved with this conflict is that I'm a Jew. It's almost obligatory that I hear about it, think about it, uh, and am asked to comment on it. So I've switched from my old stance of being very, very uninterested in having a say or no say, uninterested in the state of Israel entirely, to seeing it as an issue that I have to tackle head on and have to understand more. So that's why I'm here, and I'd like to thank Adar for having us and Zishan for joining me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Nice. Thank you. So shall I get started with my first question?
I'd actually like to start the first question because my first two questions are really softball. So I figured we'd do what I like to do in the community and say let's break bread first. So my first question is, what's your favorite dish from the Middle East or Mediterranean area?
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. You know what I do like is there's several of them, but I do like kanafa. You know,
Nafa. Okay.
yeah, they make it in different parts of the Middle East. I heard, although I haven't been there, was planning to last year, as I said, right, going to Israel. Jaffa Sweet is what I heard in the old city of Jerusalem. There's a place that makes huge kanafas. But here in Chicago, in Bridgeview, there's a kanafa place that sells kanafa, and I just love it. That and the other thing is, my wife always tells me I always have the same thing from any Middle Eastern place. I have that chicken tavuk sandwich. It's tender chicken meat. It's not a chicken shawarma. It's similar, but it's chicken tavuk. It's tender chicken meat sandwich, and I have it. I can keep eating it forever. So those two are my favorite. Uh,
Mm, awesome. Awesome. I would say that my favorite are dolma, of course. I love dolma so much. I actually grew up as a member of a community garden in the Lower East Side, and they had a really large grapevine. So I actually just grew up picking leaves off the grapevine and eating them raw.
oh
And
wow.
when I realized that there was an actual dish, I got really into it. Probably my favorite is Turkish, but I've had basically every type of dolma, even ones with meat in them, which I was not that into. And then I also just love a traditional, falafel with some hot sauce on it. And, so yeah, that's my favorite. All right, now that we've broken bread, now that we've eaten together, let's get into the meat of the discussion.
Okay, okay, sure. So now getting into the meat of the discussion, my first question for you is, how do you like living in India as a Jew? Are there other Jewish folks around you that you interact with or go to synagogue, etc.? I mean, being in South India, I'm sure it's a unique experience. Um, so, you know, how do you like it there?
As a Jew, it's it's neither here nor there for me. I don't interact with the Jewish community out here. I don't attend synagogue, nor have I for probably 20 years, I would say. Um, so I know that there was a moderately sized for the country Jewish community in Chennai at one point, and they were I think they were instrumental in building one of the famous old markets in the city. But most of the Jewish community in India has gone back to Israel and are there now. I think on the eastern coast, excuse me, no, the western coast of India, there is still a very small Jewish community with maintaining the few remaining synagogues in the area.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I did hear of Jews moving over from India and Pakistan over to Israel. I've seen a few interviews of them online, and I think they're completely integrated in the Israeli society now. But good,
Yeah.
good to hear.
Yes, certainly. Now my computer's internet is cutting out, so I'm struggling to find my questions, which is embarrassing. Let me just use my phone.
That's okay. You can pick any. It's the floor is yours. Easy, tough, swing ball, anyway, curve ball, whatever you want to call it. and I see lots of people in the audience from different parts of the world. We got people from Canada, Sweden, Pakistan. Uh, yeah,
Did we
nice.
uh did we lose Nate? We lost Nathan.
Oh, we did actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully he'll be back soon.
Yeah, and for the audience, I do tend to smile a lot, and it's easier for me to smile, so don't think much of it. It doesn't mean I'm laughing at a question, or it's just my nature. So I might be saying something very serious or controversial, and I end up smiling. So it's not a I'm laughing or smiling at anybody's misery. So, and I tell all the people that I work with, it's not you, it's my nature to smile, and it always helps me relieve stress when I smile or laugh.
well, that's a good nature to have, and rather smile too much than too little.
Right.
You know, it's interesting because when you smile, even if it's fake, but just doing releases serotonin. It releases serotonin in your brain. It's interesting because you associate that um, facial. What would you even call it? Facial expression is associated with happiness. So if you do it even when you're not happy, it releases serotonin.
Yeah, and I
Everyone try it. Everyone watching this, take a moment, close your eyes, and smile.
oh,
You see, it feels
I
good.
always
Feels
I always
good.
love smiling. I always
Yeah.
love smiling and laughing.
Nothing. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry,
All
my
good. It
technical
happens.
situation is not the best. Zishan, unfortunately, I can't access my Discord app while also maintaining connection to the stream. So I am going to be a very needy conversation partner. Do you think you could read the questions that I sent you? I'm so sorry.
No,
This
that's
sounds
okay.
bad.
It's perfectly fine. I mean, I remember this one. I do have it in front of me. How do you like living in America as compared to other places where I've lived? There's each one of them is so different. So I was born in Pakistan, but I left when I was barely 5 years old, so I don't have much memory of it besides the fact that when we used to go there for vacation, and I would be under strict instructions from my parents, be extremely careful, because they can all know that you're not from around here. So I'd stay close to my home, my grandparents' home. Um, there were there were good and bad times. I mean, I just remember playing with my friends on the street, so I don't have much memory of that. But when we moved to United Arab Emirates, right, Dubai, and so many people know of this, right? So you heard of UAE making diplomatic connections with Israel. That's what they're famous for. But the other thing that they're famous for is their architecture, the buildings, their airport, their airline, etc. But this was all before they got that famous. I mean, when I was there in Dubai, there were a few tall buildings. That was about it. Um, so I was a minority there. So UAE has interesting dynamics. Majority of the people or the population in UAE is non are people from the outside. Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. India number one, number two is Pakistan, number three I think maybe Bangladesh or some other people from other countries. So you always live there as a minority. You have your own school, so you never really assimilate. At least at that time, you never did. So I knew what it was like living as a minority. But when I moved to the States, I had more family here. My uncle was there, my aunt, my extended family. So it started feeling much more like home. And in a few years' time, I did enjoy living here. So there's two aspects of it, right? September 11 and post September 11. So pre September 11, no, I used to live in Wisconsin, about 2 hours north of where I am right now, maybe actually an hour north of where I am right now. But over there, people didn't really know much about geography. They'll think I'm Indian or Italian or something. I remember I once got a ticket, right? I got pulled over by the cop, and then in the ethnicity portion of it, or I think they had they wrote down Caucasian because they didn't or white. They didn't really know what race I was. So people weren't really aware, and I was just like any other person living here. But then, September 11th happened, and then things started to change. The laws and the way it impacted me was whenever I used to travel, I get pulled aside, and all they say is your name is flagging up in the system. So they, a lot of the Muslims went through. So my experience after September 11 wasn't the greatest, but then I got used to it. But the thing that I like living here, and the things that I enjoy the most is you meet people from all sorts of background, right? From all countries, all different types of backgrounds. So you get to try out their food, talk to them, and understand them. So it gives you a very high level of tolerance for the other person. So, like in Pakistan, where you might hate somebody, here you'd be sitting with them, eating with them, hanging out with them, no issues. So I think it helped me grow as a person here, and I continue to do so. And as I mentioned before, I like to travel. I've been to more than 20 countries, and I always learn something new from the other person. You
Hmm.
take out the bad from the other side, and then take the good from the other side, and it helps you grow. I have a story from each country that I've been to, but here, like I said, um, recently everything is so, since Trump came into the office, everything got so political. Everyone has an opinion, who has to say something, but I feel that living here, you get to learn a lot though from and living around different communities, you learn and grow as a person, and I love living here, and this is what I call home.
Great, great. Well, I've got my questions in front of me now, so
Okay.
I'll no longer be so unprofessional. But I'm really that is a very interesting life story. Growing up in three different countries, being a minority in the country that you're in, but basically everyone that you're interacting with being a minority is something that I definitely relate to. Growing up in New York City, more people are not white or not, you know, Irish, German, British, Dutch, or French, or whatever the average white American is. That definitely sticks out to me. Something about being here in India that is most shocking to me is is that I'm the only white person in in not at all a homogenous zone. India has a whole lot of different ethnic groups that travel to different states, to different cities to work. So it's not that I'm just around to Tamil people because I live in the Tamil state, but I'm around Assamese, Nagaland people, people from the north, people from central India, Bengalis, Malayalam people. It's really mixed. But I'm basically the only white person I've seen in a year since Corona happened. Yeah, they mostly left, I think.
Do you get the look sometimes? People look at you or stare at you a lot when you're outside, or not really?
Yeah, people, because I don't live in the city. If I lived in Chennai proper, then I would probably be seeing more white people and maybe getting less looks. Certainly before Corona, it was very common for, if I had stopped at a tea shop, somebody would want to talk to me. Somebody would want to practice English with me, which I love. I absolutely love that. My first friend here is a guy that was at a tea shop with a squirrel in his pocket, and apparently he found the squirrel. It had fallen out of a tree, and he sort of nursed it back to health, and its name was Tengu, which I told him was Japanese for a spirit. But of course, he already knew that. He's certainly uh, just as worldly as me. He's actually a Muslim guy. His family lives in Saudi Arabia for business, so he sort of goes back and forth between there. Um, but yeah, people want to talk to me. Now during Corona, in the beginning of Corona, it was a little different because um, in the West, the opinion or the perception of people bringing corona into the country was, from what I heard, I can't be 100% sure, was more along the lines of, oh, it's East Asians, it's Chinese people bringing corona. But here in India, it was mostly it was mostly traced to an Italian tourist group that arrived in New Delhi. So, I could pass for Italian, I guess. So
Yeah,
very quickly, once Corona started to actually become a global concern, I would be walking down the street, and three boys stacked on their motorbike would yell Corona at me, as they passed. And they were
oh,
having fun. I think I didn't take it too personally, but it was certainly it was different than people just being like, "Hello, America," or something like that. So
yeah, yeah. I know it's not
it's
just in
different.
India.
It's
In
different.
many other countries, people look at you if you're a tourist and they keep staring at you, and tell my wife that that's okay. It's no looks don't hurt. Let them um, keep. I shouldn't say looks don't hurt, but they can look all they want. It's harmless. They just trying to figure out who you are, where you're from, and they try to analyze you just by the way you look, the way you walk, and you carry yourself. So when I travel, it doesn't really bother me unless I'm getting the dirty looks. And if I can tolerate it for some time, but not for too long. So, all right, interesting dynamics. Okay,
Yeah.
so how do you describe yourself? I know you said you haven't been to the synagogue in like 20 years, so you describe yourself as ethnically Jewish, I assume, not religious Jew. And how do you describe your connection to Israel? And I see in
So
audience there is lots of comments going
okay.
on. They're saying they were expecting a religious Jew and a religious Muslim. But I think once we get a little bit more into the meaty topic, you'll see religion come up and it's and we'll see the references of it. So stay tuned. We'll be getting more into the nitty gritty. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Yeah, yeah. This is just introductions. We're getting into the meat of the issue. All right. So me myself as a Jew, how do I identify as a Jew? Yes, currently I am non-practicing, but I view myself as both ethnically Jewish and historically Jewish. So I come from a long line of Jews on both sides of my family. Um, Both immigrated from Russia at the turn of the 20th century, escaping pogroms by about a year or 4 years. And I was raised conservative, or Masorti Jew for anyone outside of America. And the conservative, in conservative Jewry, it's, some would say it's in between Orthodox and Reform. I say it's more uh, to the side of Orthodox, of maybe somebody like Rafi, who is sort of moderate Orthodox. I don't know which sect, but um, Masorti Jews, conservative Jews, take a put a lot of weight on the historical aspects of our community. Um, so I grew up in a Hebrew after school where 2 or 3 days a week I would go for 3 hours. We would daven every class. We would practice Hebrew every class, learn our history every class, learn current events, and do arts and crafts, because we were, this was from the age of 6 to
I think your audio got cut off unless you guys can still hear Nathan online. Yeah, I think he's cutting in and I think he's off for a
So
second, but
I'll repeat the last few seconds. Um, so I spent, so I spent Is it good now?
The video is off,
Is
but
it
we can
good
still
now?
hear you. You can keep talking. Yeah,
Good.
y-
Okay.
no, keep.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
I
can
can
hear.
hear.
I can hear and see you. Yeah, you're good.
Zishan, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Uh, okay. Okay. I apologize. I'm not in the I'm not in the city. I'm in a village, like I said. So so I spent 3 days, 2 to 3 days a week, davening, reading scripture, practicing Hebrew, learning our history, focusing on current events. I like the history part the most. I somewhat enjoyed the language, and we did arts and crafts too because it was a after school for children, and that was until the age of 12. And I'm 31 now, so the age of 12 for me was 2002, and that was right after 9/11, right around the time of the Second Intifada. And at that point, I was very socially integrated with a lot of far left groups who they only really hear the Palestinian narrative, or maybe they hear both narratives and they find the Palestinian narrative more compelling. But either way, they were very they weren't particularly understanding of my culture, and I just felt like it wasn't going to get me anywhere to stay involved, invested in Jewish culture. So I actually sort of divorced myself from it for a long period of my life, until I was fused my bar mitzvah. Um, my 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 rabbi told me, Natan, you can say no to reading the scripture in front of the congregation, but this choice makes you a man in my eyes. This is your bar mitzvah, whether you like it or not. Much to my dismay, I was trying to, I was trying to, you know. Um, so that went on. I was very pro Palestine, very sort of not anti-Jewish. I still practiced, practiced as the youngest child at Passover, went to all the Hebrew holidays. Um, it just didn't really want to be so involved with the culture, didn't want to go to Israel or anything like that until I would say around 2015 when Trump announced his presidency. He didn't call Jews rapists and murderers, and some of them are good people, I assume. But I understand that the nature of racism is that if one group, if it's okay to demonize and remove the humanity of one group, that it's very, very, very easy to dehumanize and remove the humanity of another group. And I'm also familiar with fringe radical ideology on both the right and the left. And I know that especially on the right, the fringe radical ideology is that Jews are going to are trying to replace white people, are trying to, you know, degrade America and every European nation and so on and so forth. So I recognized his rhetoric as in line with those radical right-wing ideas, and immediately knew that the situation for Jews in at least America was going to have a bit of a downturn. So that's how I identify myself as a Jew. I after that started to refamiliarize myself with the conflict, refamiliarize myself um, with the concept of Israel as a homeland, and now I see Israel as a very imperfect state, a state that's in progress, an imperfect union, shall we say, um, that that I'm invested in improving and doing that in, turning it into an emergent reality as opposed to, this disturbing static nightmare that it's been for. So that's how I view myself as a Jew. Um, so now I've got my questions, so I can be a fantastic member of the conversations. So I'm interested to hear what are your impressions of the Israel-Palestine conflict, and how have those impressions changed over time, if at all?
Yeah, no, that's a deep and could be a loaded question, but that is a very good question, though. That I have my current impression and what I used to think. So, I've, like I said, I've dealt with both the Palestinian side and the Jewish side, and although people don't mention that they're Israeli citizens, but they go back and forth, so I know they do have connections there. And I've had some good experiences with them, some bad experiences, like my uh, a recent one, right? We're coming back from Albania, and there was a group of Orthodox Jews. They were assisted by the Frankfurt personnel, because they did segregate women and men, and my wife is like, don't. I was like, no, I just want to go talk to them. But when I went in them, I did get some looks. It didn't bother me, because I said over here, where I live, when we go by the beach, they do have right before Sabbath, they do have their evening prayer on Friday night. So I deal with them, and I did have good experiences. That one of my coworker, he's Jewish. He's never been to Israel, but we do talk a lot about politics. He's not a religious Jew either. Um, but so I did hear a lot of the Palestinian side, and one thing that amazed me was, so when I was looking to travel, I could go directly to Tel Aviv, but they could never fly in. So then I find out that, even if they are American citizens, they cannot go because they hold a Palestinian ID. And I do remember the time when the wall was built, right, in from dividing mainland Israel from West Bank and all of that. So I remember it was in the news a lot. So the way I used to view it, up until I was like, what's the solution? So I did find out about the Balfour Declaration, and I was like, well, that was really the turning point. The British came in, they said, okay, now we're going to establish a homeland for the Jews, and they started letting everybody in. So I used to think, okay, the solution would be that anybody who came after the Balfour Declaration uh, will have to go back. They'll have to leave Israel and go back to where they came from, and that would be the proper solution. And then the Palestinians who do have connection, like they were born there at least, and their children who their immediate descendants who left during Nakba because of it, or they fled, or they were forced to leave, they would come back, right? But I didn't really have a solution for who's going to rule the state. But all I knew was, okay, that those Jews that came in after the Balfour Declaration, they need to go back. But then I started thinking more and more, and I found out um, from Omar, Khalifa Omar, when he came into Jerusalem, he didn't expel anybody. And then when Salahuddin came in, he didn't expel anybody. So this is where kind of religion comes in. That if you go to a land, let's say the Muslims came over. I'm not debating Palestinian how they belong to the land or they don't belong to the land. Let's assume they came and they're ruling the land. You cannot expel anybody. So I had to let go of that opinion that you cannot expel anybody. So everybody who's living in Israel, all of it, right? So from, let's say, from the river to the sea, everybody that's in it, you cannot expel them. So they came before the Balfour Declaration, after, before, whoever is in it, they have to stay. And then when I started looking, then I started meeting people from Jerusalem, and anybody who's from Jerusalem, Jew or a Muslim, I always give a lot of respect to them. And then there were some uh, Palestinians that cannot go back, and I was like, why can't you go back? because they took on the American citizenship. They only had, I think, a blue ID, and now they cannot go back. I'm like, well, you should have just taken up Israeli citizenship. Well, they said no, we can't do that. We don't agree, etc. So now my stance has changed to the point that where I think both of the people living in the land need to coexist in a manner that's agreeable to both. And I do have my own proposals of the solution that I'll get into, but now it has radically changed from the point that I was thinking that, the Jews who came after Balfour Declaration need to go back to the point now that now all the Jews living here from the river to the sea, they stay, and so do the Palestinians and the Druze and Ethiopian Jews and all of that. Everybody needs to stay where they are, and there needs to be a solution that is acceptable to both sides. Because I think when people don't agree, it has to be equal solution for all, or equal loss for both. But that really has to be the case: equal loss for both sides, and coexist in a manner that is comfortable for you. So like I said, it changed dramatically, and that's what actually prompted me to go online and listen to the folks. And the other thing that kind of changed my perspective was, I you hear of these people, the Ask Project, Rudy, and like
Hmm.
Adar, all these people. I mean, a lot of them, especially from Tel Aviv, um, right? You hear of them talking about coexistence, and I didn't really hear of that in the past uh, as much as I am now. So that really gives me hope that both sides can coexist, and live in harmony, minus the political aspect of it. Because people tend to say, "Oh, you know what? Mahmoud Abbas said this. He's saying the Ashkenazi Jews don't belong here. They don't come from here, or something along those lines." So that's what the
Hmm.
Palestinians say. And then you'll have somebody saying, "Well, Naftali Bennett, he supports the settlement, so he's pro settlements, and he's going to take over and annex West Bank and things like that." But I'm more
Hmm.
concerned about the people on the ground and how we deal with them. And like I said, so this is how my view has changed, and I'm looking to help people understand and come to a consensus. Because I've never, uh, y- I mean, I can go on and on, but a simple example is, you go to a discussion that's by Palestinian, then the Israeli side will be upset. Or if there's a Israeli giving presentation, then the Palestinian side is upset. So that shouldn't be the case. We should be able to learn from each other, and tolerate each other. You won't agree, you won't like it, you might hate it, but you have to learn how to tolerate the harshest of comments and critiques that come towards you.
Hmm. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Um,
Yeah,
s-
I can't lie when I say when I say how shocking it is every time I hear such things as, oh, the people before Balfour have to leave, the people after whatever have to leave. It's very shocking to me to hear, because the act of moving 7 million people or 6 million people is just, it's so outlandish to me. And I mean, it would create such a huge crisis in the world, you know so I'm seeing in the comments, the Mossad is bringing up specific families of Palestinians who are ethnically, from Bosnia or from Iraq or Saudi. But what generally happens, unless they're very rich, and this is broadly, unless a family is very rich, what generally happens when they move to a new area is that they find a husband or a wife from the area, and they don't marry their cousin. Maybe that's not the case among some of these families. Their names, so they're probably somewhat prominent. Maybe they are you know marrying their cousins here and there, but you'll find that on both sides, unless it's Druze and Samaritans, there people are mixing. People are holistically a part of each other's groups when they're living in the same nation. So just the same on the other side, people always talk about, oh, the Ashkenazis, oh, they're from, they should go back to Europe, whatever. But they they're not from Europe anymore. They have been living in Israel for 70 years, and for the most part, they've been mixing with the Mizrahi, which was an equal part of the nation. So even that's why when you say the people from post Balfour, I instantly think all of the Jews, because there's very few people aside from the very bourgeois, insular elite in Tel Aviv who aren't marrying, their neighbor who happens to be Mizrahi, or their neighbor who happens to be Sephardi, or Ethiopian. So, you know, that's just my reaction to your initial one. But I'm very glad to hear that your view has changed and moved more towards a on the ground approach to what I would consider a holistic approach to the conflict.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really possible, as you said, moving all these people out because there is a practical aspect of it. There is no, I mean, there are some people who have dual citizenship, but for the most part, they are Israeli citizens now. I mean, it's not like they'll get up and go, nor do they want to, and nor they should. Um, pre Balfour Declaration, you had so there's a group of Jews who always lived there, right? From 3,000
Yeah,
years ago. Also in
yeah,
the old city of Jerusalem, the Mizrahi Jews, they always continue to live there and they're here. And then the Sephardic Jews in 1492, interestingly enough, both the Muslims and the Jews got expelled from the Iberian Peninsula and they came to Northern Africa. And then some of them came, and then in the Northern African region, there was people did convert to Judaism, so the clan grew and they came to the land, right? So they felt, so what I'm trying to get at is what I couldn't deny or negate anymore was the fact that the Jew, right, he is ethnically Jewish, or if he claims to be a Jew, that there is a connection to the Holy Land, right? There is that connection. So think of it. So they've got their Temple Mount, right? So the Jews have their Temple Mount. They have a connection. They feel a connection. So that is something I could not deny anymore. I mean, even though I wanted to, but then I said no. And then I found out more and more about the connection of the land and how it is. So I did have to give up on that stance. So now I'm more, like I said, of more of a holistic approach and how we deal with. And it's more so that I was on Discord the other day and we were discussing about a holistic solution, but I was like, let's deal with the situation on the ground first and build your way up. I mean, you can't have two sides shaking hand and the next day having kumbaya, right? Okay, today we shake hands, tomorrow it's all kumbaya, nice and happy. I don't think it's going to happen like that. You really have to talk about the situation on the ground and what do you do with those people? How do you make them feel safe, secure, comfortable, happy, non-expelled, and then you build on top of it, and it comes from the ground up. You're not going to have a leader tomorrow that's going to say, let's shake hands and then go and live here so happily ever after. And the other thing that part of my stance changed was that the people who were expelled, I don't know of the exact number, but I've heard 800,000 people expelled, including from North Africa, Morocco, Iraq, and all the other places. They need to have their property back. If you cannot give them their property, their houses, give them back their money and citizenship, and they're free to choose what they want. So they get the money and citizenship. They want to come back, they can. Like, for example, what happened in Morocco, there were when there's the name of the place I cannot pronounce. So when the Jewish um, people left from there, they left hoping to come back, and they didn't really sell their houses. They gave the keys to the houses to their neighbors, expecting they'll come back, but they never did come back. So, like I said, um, both parties need to compromise and come together on a solution. I'll get into the nitty gritty, and I know a lot of people are. I remember a comment saying one of the guys was like, "Oh, look at this guy from he's Pakistani origin, but he doesn't feel safe in his country." I didn't really say that. It was more of my parents knowing that I'm not street smart, that I need to be careful where I go. I didn't really bash on this Pakistani security or anything like that. But although we can talk about it if you want. But anyways, coming back to the to this point here. So the next question that I was going to get into is a little bit more specific, and it has to do with what are your thoughts on the 1970 law that gives the right to Jews to a petition in the court to take back properties that belong to them, but it doesn't give the same. The law doesn't apply to Muslims or Christians or Jews who are Palestinians to take back their land wherever it was or their property.
Mm. So I have a different opinion on property rights and than you do. But I do agree with you on some form of reparations being in order for both sides, for the Mizrahi Jews who were expelled, for the Ashkenazi Jews who were expelled from Europe, and as well for the Palestinians who were expelled from their homes. Um, and I also disagree somewhat with you on the letter of how reparations should look. I don't necessarily think that cash should be the first choice. I think that reparations in the form of industrial work, what's the word? Of infrastructure contracts and infrastructure development is probably better for the long-term uplifting of a people on the land. I could understand it not working out so well for Ashkenazis who don't want to go back to Poland or Russia, or Mizrahis who don't want to have property in Iraq or Yemen, and the feasibility of a government, of especially those two nations, paying them even is also somewhat in question. And that relates to your question on the 1970 law, in that I personally don't think that people who are living somewhere, that whether it was given to them by the Jordanian government or given to them by the Israeli government, should be responsible for vacating their homes that they own or that they pay for, that they've worked on for now it's generations. So yeah, and at one point very recently, I actually did think different, that it might be somewhat right for people on both sides to get their homes back. But now the way I see it is that it just creates another person who has to move. Whereas if the state is responsible for fixing this, as opposed to it's a civil matter of somebody living somewhere, someone's a squatter, someone's not paying rent. If the state takes the responsibility and says, okay, we need to build a new building, the state can build a building with better standards than a private citizen. They're more likely to do it in a safe way. And the 1970 law also has a lot to do with Jews escaping persecution. In practicality, most of the Jews in the world that were being persecuted were already persecuted and escaped by 1970. Whether it was the Mizrahis in the 50s, late 40s, or the Ashkenazis in the 30s and 40s. So I guess the Ethiopians took advantage of that law, and that's very good that they did. I do see that so that law doesn't exist in a vacuum of only Jews deserve to have a country that they can escape to. it arose from a history of repeated persecutions. So even now, I'm 5 years ago, 10, no, excuse me, 6 years ago, I wasn't really thinking that I might have to at one point escape America to go to, to go to another country. But as I see it now, and especially in the past few months, with the sharp, in general, there was an increase over the past few years during the Trump years of hate crimes against Jews in America, and a very large increase in the past few months in response the to the conflict, which I don't like the conflict. I don't enjoy when children, non-combatants, people's homes are destroyed. All of that to me is bad. But I do think that Jews in particular have a need for a law that allows them to be given citizenship or to be allowed entry. I obviously I think that it's a great injustice that Palestinians are not given the same opportunity, and maybe we can talk about this more at a greater length when we discuss our ideas for for solutions to the conflict. But in short, for now, I definitely think that Palestinians deserve to return to the country. Unfortunately, I don't think that it's feasible for them to return to their homes, to their family homes, and I think that's a tragedy. But I just don't know that moving somebody out who's also possibly been there for generations now is the best answer. I think that the government should be responsible as a part of the reparations program for building new homes, for providing services for the betterment of their lives.
Yeah. So you would agree that the people who are staying where they are may be Israelis or any Israeli or is any Palestinian, that they be allowed to stay where they are and not have to.
Silvan, Shiksha. I mean, yeah. There's it's known that Jews lived in Sheikh Jarrah. It's known that Palestinians lived in Jaffa, and they want to go back. And I think they should be able to go back to those neighborhoods. Obviously, the Jerusalem is a little bit harder to build a new a housing complex or a neighborhood in. But I think that they should be given new homes at either very good deals or with some sort of government program that makes them moving into a house that they might not otherwise be able to afford, hopefully in the same area, if not the same neighborhood. But I don't think that evicting somebody is the answer to a war with injustices on both sides. I just think that's another injustice that that puts people in a bad situation.
Yeah. No. And I agree with you on that. Is they that they need to have, like, the expulsion shouldn't happen, right? Because the narrative that I see online, and even so, there are two narratives, right? So one is, you'll hear the Palestinians saying they just want to kick us out. They don't want us to be here. And then from days, like, let's say Sheikh Jarrah, right? So Sheikh Jarrah, two narratives. One, they're trying to kick us out. The other narrative is it's rent. They're not paying rent. They're Arab squatters. And I actually found the history of Sheikh Jarrah, right? So some of you might remember this, or the name's going to resonate. Nehlat Shimon. Might not pronounce it properly, but Nehlat Shimon, another area, and Sheikh Jarrah. There were three different areas. Nehlat Shimon, the Jewish people used to live there, and at some point they had to leave. And I think from Nehlat Shimon, it was the British who said, gave them 2 hours when the rioting happened. They said she had to leave, which is not right. But the area today is you see Palestinian families living there who've been living there since late 40s or 50s, And the argument uh, or the narrative is they're not paying rent. Well, they're using this 1970 law to try to get them out of there. But like I said, they can't really go back to Haifa or Jaffa. Um, and and I think we agree that they should not be kicked out of their house. But just to address the narrative is that there's no. They're saying that the land was bought in 1875 by one of the Jewish family, and it transferred ownership now to this Nehlat Shimon organization. But I can give you guys the link where the Nehlat Shimon land is actually getting sold online. People buy it and end up moving there, and then the Palestinians get kicked out. So I think we're in agreement that the law is is not just that it doesn't do its fair justice to the Palestinians and both sides. So if Palestinian is saying that now I need to go back to that house in Jaffa and an Israeli is living there, the Israeli should continue to live there, and the Palestinians should continue to live where they are. And if they do want to go back, and they should have the right to go back, not to the exact same house. And I think that's a good compromise that people can agree on, and they should. And if you never kick anybody out of their house, you don't really put the seed of hatred in them. They would be actually happy that or be content that they're getting they have the ability and the right to stay where they are. And the other thing is, someone was commenting on the change in demographic. Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a concern, like the change in demographics. I know, like for the Palestinian side, right? So when the British came over and they allowed all the Jews from the Ashkenazi Jews to come in, it did change the demographic. It's a very bitter pill to swallow. But if, like I said, you always have to look at Omar ibn al-Khattab when he came in. Never expelled anybody. What he did was, so there's an interesting story. And Nathan or Adar, if I'm going too long, feel free to cut in because I'm full of information and full of opinion at this point. I'm very passionate
I'm
about this. And
I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I really
okay,
quickly, actually, if you're giving me the opportunity, I would like to address a question and maybe correct something in my language. Fremat02 says, you often speak about Ashkenazis and Mizrahim, but there are no Sephards in
Sephardi
Israel.
Jews,
Yeah,
there are.
Sephardis. He wrote Sephards, and of course there are. I 2 points. I mention Ashkenazis and Mizrahim because those are the two most mentioned, maybe outside of the land. I know that's a fact. People are like, oh, look at those white Ashkenazis. But and then people on the left and is speaking outside of Israel will be like, but half the country is Mizrahi and they're all mixed now and all that. Of course, there's Sephardis. Of course, there are. And in fact, but another point I would like to make about that distinction of these distinctions, and really there's the fourth, there's the sub-Saharan African component, is that to me these distinctions don't even make sense, beyond maybe telling you what dish you could ask you could expect them to cook at a potluck. My family on my dad's side, they're probably Sephardic. I say probably because our furthest records back, I said that they immigrated from Russia. They're not from Russia, but they immigrated from Russia. 100 years before they immigrated in Russia is where our paper trail, our official documents, are last traced. And we were in Armenia. Now, does Armenia make us Sephardi? Does Armenia make us Mizrahi? Does Russia make us Ashkenazi? To me, it's just they're all Jews. We came from Armenia, and at that point, maybe we were Mizrahis, maybe we were Sephardis. I actually don't know the the area distinctions that people decide those two things on, because I've heard of Syrian Jews who are Sephardi. I thought all Jews east of the Holy Land were Mizrahi, but so to me the distinction doesn't matter. We can talk about colorism. That is a problem in every community, every race, every ethnicity has colorism. So I think but I do think that that's a good point that you made. I didn't mention the Sephardis because so often they are not a part of the main discussion of that sort of fake dichotomy of all the white Ashkenazis and the Middle Eastern Mizrahis, but I do think that's a good question and a good point to ask me to clarify on. And also Or Halamish, who I also really love. Sorry to now be the one talking so much.
No, no, that's
It's
good. It's
made a
it's good.
great.
It's please keep going.
Thank you. Or Halamish, who I really appreciate his input in the community, he said the right of return is a similar law to many European countries, while the Palestinians wish to implement a similar law to their own future nation state that they want to create. And I think that if it's a two-state solution, of course they need that. Of course their government should instate that. And in the long run, I believe in a federal solution, which would absolutely have parity in their immigration laws. With some allowances for people who are in persecution scenarios or stateless, you know. So of course, very very good point, or that it is a very very it is a European convention that there is a repatriation allowed.
Yeah,
So yes.
like I know Spain and Portugal had a law that you can, if you can, because the Muslims and the Jews were kicked out at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Late 1400s, so they kind of became allies. They were buddy buddy with each other. And interestingly enough, the Sephardic community in Hebron, right? Many of you know this or might not know this. The Sephardic community and the Muslim community lived in harmony for for generations, and because, like I said, because they were kicked out at the same time. And I forget, there was and your history is pretty interesting, Nathan, that you guys came from USSR, because in the late 1800s is where the anti-Semitism was on the rise, and Hitler actually got some of his ideology from that side of the world. I
Yeah,
think.
actually, it was before the USSR. It was I forget which czar it was or which emperor, but we found a document from I think it was Portland, Maine, where my father's side of the family first landed, and they actually had to, in their documents, uh, refute loyalty to the sovereign of Russia. I forget which emperor. I think it was Nicholas or something at the time. Uh, so yes, no, you're absolutely right that it was a very unfortunate place to be for Jews at the time.
Yeah, and we're talking about the right of return. Yeah, I mean, it's I don't. There was a question here that if a Jew is living in a house and Palestinian used to own it, and you have the right of return, why does he take that house? No, we're not saying he comes and takes over that exact house, because now a Jewish family or whatever uh, ethnicity they are, they've been living there since 1948. It doesn't make sense to let them go. You're born and raised in the house. You've got memories, but you do have a right to come into the vicinity. You're from Jaffa, you can go. The government can give you a house in Jaffa or someplace nearby that you're comfortable and live there. You don't have to go into the exact house. And of course, if there's harmony amongst the two communities and safety, people will welcome each other. I mean, you know, because the India-Pakistan thing is kind of similar, not although it's not exactly the same. So you've got a British India, which got divided up into three countries. But before they were divided, they've lived together for hundreds of years. And as soon as this hatred started, I remember my dad telling me that that he couldn't eat from the same utensil that a Hindu could eat at. So he'd go to his friend's house, but they give him a different utensil, especially that's made for the servants or someone who they think is lower class. and I'm sure both sides uh, started feeling bad for each other. But these were some of the things that had started to go on. So until and unless you kind of put the seed of hatred in somebody, they would always treat each other like in Hebron, right? I'll take that example, or in the old city of Jerusalem. The people who stayed there, they lived there without any issues up until 1892, right? When you had one of the aliyahs. But up until then, they lived in peace, and there weren't any issues at that point.
That's correct. And one of the biggest mistakes I think the first Zionists in Israel made during that first Aliyah was not integrating themselves with the community in a big enough way. You know, when they bought property, brought farmland, and kicked the farmers off, the Palestinian farmers. I think they're referred to as falahin. That was one of the biggest mistakes, because as soon as you kick, especially in a desert environment, if you kick a group of people off of the land, they become somewhat destitute. They become transient, and it creates many refugee crises in the next town over or in the surrounding areas. And I think that that was one of the biggest mistakes that they made. And I feel like if they had integrated themselves into the environment more sustainably without disrupting the especially the lower class people there, then there would have been a lot less support for the 48 for the war against Israel.
Yeah, and I think I can agree to that because the way they actually went about dealing with the Jewish migration from Europe was not was horrible. I mean, there was zero effort from their side to educate the current population as to who those people are and where they're coming from and what their connection is and what needs to happen. Because yeah, the moment you expel somebody, they will hate you for it. And this idea of see right now what's going on is you've had the right in Israel is thinking that the more you suppress the Palestinian, you kind of corner them. At some point, they'll give up. But honestly, if I don't think that's gonna work because if your back is up against the wall, you have nothing left. Then you're gonna fight till you die. I mean, if you've got no land. I mean, recently today, I think there was a village in the West Bank that was bulldozed, and the villagers don't have a place to go. But if you do that to somebody, he's gonna hate you forever. I mean, it's gonna take a long time for him to get over the hatred. But things like
Yeah.
that and shouldn't happen from both sides, right? You shouldn't be expelling the Jews. As I mentioned earlier, they lived in North Africa, they lived in Iraq. They have, if you've lived in a place like in North Africa, if the Jews lived there for almost 500 years, they have a part of that in them. It's they're part of the family, and they should have the right to go back if they wanted to. Um, Oh my God! Here, Rip, I think I'm starting to hear Hamas and all of the other things. So I'll pause for a minute and come back to this, and I'll try to see if you have another question.
Uh, Throwing it to me for another question.
Yes.
Okay. Uh, how does your religion affect your views of the Israel and Palestine conflict and other conflicts as well?
Yeah, one thing that I'm grateful for that my religion does is grounding me. It helped me change my original perspective of, when I talked about the Jews have to go back from Israel if they're pre 1917. So I found out I cannot do that. So it was a bitter pill for me to swallow at the time. But now it's like, it's no big deal. They have to stay where they are. And then the other conflicts in the world, like the Kashmir conflict that's going on, the Uyghurs and what's going on in the like here in America, right? When Trump came into office, I mean, oh my God, there was a barrage of anti-Semitism, and I remember um, And one of the things that was so through my religion, I learned this growing up that the Jews are Ahlul Kitab. They are the people of the book. They had prophet after Abraham, his son. They had a lineage of prophet, and they had a book. So I always grew up respecting them. And then when I started becoming religious, I learned that Jews are the closest in practicing religion to us, right? So all the way from circumcision, the kosher law, the segregation, how you treat men and women. Honestly, I think the women get treated better in religious household because they have no financial responsibility. They can do whatever they want with their money and things like that. So it helps me ground myself and have a basis of how do I deal with conflict. Because if left to if just left to emotions or conjecture or opinion, one side will say kick out the other. The other guys, both sides are going to say kick this out, kick these out. One side will say kick out the Ashkenazi Jews. The other side is going to say the right of return does not apply to you, and we're gonna leave Gaza as it is, and the security wall as it is. You guys stay at status quo. But that's not going to resolve the problem. The hatred is not going to go away. You never go back to. I mean, I'd like things to go back to where they were in 1891 in the Ottoman Empire, right? Where the Jews could come in, immigrate, live together with the Palestinian. And someone made a comment, yes, Yemeni Jews had it bad. Silwan, Shiloah, they stayed there. The Ottoman Empire said that this is a place where they ought to be staying. It was sad what happened to them. Um, and they did have it bad, so it was their home. Then they should have never left, right? But now that they left, what are you gonna do? There's no Yemeni Jew that they're trying to put back. I mean, they ought to be respected, and you learn from the history and you move on. So you don't expel one population because of another. That's just increases uh, the issue. But like I said, the religion helps you grind and um, no, I'm not putting a picture on the Ottoman Empire up until 1892. The Jews could live where they wanted. It was only in 1892 and after when they said that the Jews, even though they're Ottoman citizens, they cannot live in the land anymore. It wasn't 100% picture perfect, but you had the communities. The Jews lived in Hebron, Old City of Jerusalem, and there are a few other cities, Nablus, and three other cities, and it was harmonious if you look at it. So we can go back to that harmony. We just have to work towards it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And on the topic of the evictions, of displacing the Fellaheen, um, I come I come from a neighborhood in the Lower East Side and the East Village where uh, until recently, until the past 15 years, the new inhabitants and the old inhabitants, which is the old inhabitants of that neighborhood, were uh, Black, Hispanic, Jewish, Eastern European, and what started to happen in the 60s and 70s as New York City, as the East Village was, or excuse me, as the Lower East Side was carved into a new neighborhood called the East Village and marketed by real estate investors as, the cheaper version of the West Village for artists and college students to go to. The communities that were already there, instead of just moving away, instead of fighting against what is considered gentrification, they said to the new inhabitants, which were mostly artists and community oriented people already, hey, let's integrate, let's become one community and really create a holistic uh, neighborhood that isn't just, oh, this building now has white people and you don't go past that block because that's where the projects are. And this neighborhood, by the way, I grew up one block from the first ever government built projects or ghetto or hood in the United States, and 3 blocks from the first tenements that were purchased by the state to be used as affordable housing for non-white people. Essentially, is what it was. It was just non-white people in those in those blocks. Um, so I have seen what it's like now. Unfortunately, now with the sort of involvement of NYU purchasing a lot of buildings, driving up the prices, and the bridge and tunnel crowd turning the neighborhood into more of a bar, a bar and entertainment zone. That's that's gone down, but it still exists. There's still, the Nuyorican Poets Cafe still exists. The Henry Street Settlement Arts Center still exists. The 14th Street Y does what it can, um, and it's the community gardens, which were reclaimed from empty lots and turned into official state recognized parks, are still there. So it can be done. It just requires good faith acts on the parts of both people, and then they can team up and bully the government, which is what we have to do in a democracy anyway.
Yeah, and you kind of see those situations here too in the Midwest region, how it was, and some of the issues that the African American community had to go through. But like I said, earlier, you have to kind of learn from the past and not stay in it, and try to move towards the future that you can build on. That's why I specifically, uh, after Balfour Declaration, specifically, I didn't go into all the events and all of that because I know that's highly emotional. So you should look at, um, where you have common ground and then go from there. Because I mean, just I was listening to the debate last night. Okay, you have 3 Palestinians and 3 Israelis, all of them English, all of them highly educated, and um, at some point, they it turned into an argument where at that point the moderator had to come in and and take control of the situation. So that's why I said, you got to focus on the common ground. And we're talking about Hamas and PLO. Look, you have to understand, if you in and Peter, uh, he's a famous Jewish person here, Bernard, I think, as you
Yeah,
pronounce.
Peter Beinart. Yeah, yeah.
Beinar, he was even detained in Ben Gurion Airport, and he made a good point. He said, in the absence of a political voice, if you do not give people a political voice or a way to express their frustration politically, they will resort to violence. Doesn't mean that it's right for them to do so, but it becomes easy for them. It becomes a breeding ground for uh, for a disaster. Think of this for an
Mhm.
example, right? IS, where did it come from? It didn't come from a vacuum. It came from the area that was a war zone for years and years. And people now know that ISIS wasn't really representing Islam. What they were doing was anti-Islam, if completely the opposite of it. So you look at where people are and they don't have a political voice. They'll lean towards Hamas. They're like, you know what? Okay, at least Hamas is trying to do something for us now. I don't agree with them sending rockets to civilian areas, because what might happen is those are civilians. As a kid, baby, Palestinian, a Jew, Muslim, anybody could be killed. But it does earn them a lot of brownie points, because they see, oh, look, at one side you have some of the Arab countries shaking hands with Israel, and on the other side no one's speaking up for Palestinians. So they tend to lean on Hamas. Oh, Hamas is going to give us something. Yeah, it might give you brownie points, but it might not, it won't get you a solution and peace, at the end of the day, right? And actually that
Right.
brings me, yeah, you were going to say something, Nathan?
I was just agreeing. Sorry, I'm used to verbal acknowledgments.
Yeah, no, that's good. But like I said, some people might not like it that I'm bashing Hamas or any other leader, but you cannot. It's good. It might make you feel good that a rocket is thrown and Israeli. So you see Palestinian village get destroyed, or let's say you see 10 Palestinians get kicked out of their home. Okay, so then Hamas is gonna throw a rocket. It might make you feel good momentarily, but then what happened? Some innocent Israeli on the Tel Aviv side died, who could be a complete neutral person who might have escaped persecution, who could be anybody. He's innocent, right? So he died for no reason whatsoever. He never knew the reason why he died, nor his family member. And he's going to hate Hamas and Palestinians for the rest of his life. So you didn't end up getting a solution. So that's the reason why people lean on the extremist side. Um, uh, but anyways, that kind of brings me. Um Jews had no political rights in Ottoman Empire. They did not result in violence. That's another topic that I might be getting into, but because this discussion kind of gets me into my next question is Nathan, how does peace look like um, for you in the Holy Land? I know that's a
That's a
pretty
good
heavy
question.
question,
That's a yeah, very open-ended question.
and someone is saying you've got a poker face.
A poker face.
uh,
Such a poker face. I didn't mention my entire background, but I do have a background in acting, so I try and keep my animated facial expressions for truly out
No,
there. Yeah.
you know what it was. Your video was frozen for who knows how long. I just removed you from the. I removed you and brought you back on, and it fixed it. But I think we had like a good 20 minutes of a frozen. So yeah, that is a good poker face.
Adar, I actually have no idea what you're talking about. I was moving the whole time.
Well, that pretty impressive then.
yeah, combination of
Interesting though. Interesting.
yeah.
Um,
See, he's smiling now. It's not a
you broke my glare. You broke my game. Now you know my hand is garbage.
yeah. But
No.
one thing, sorry, one more thing about Hamas. Someone is saying that I know Yusuf is saying that it's a armed resistance to put pressure on the Israeli side to give Palestinians the rights. Now I know there is, people justify violence in different ways. Like for example, the I forget the name of the person who went into the Ibrahimi Mosque, the Tomb of the Patriarchs, and he killed a bunch of Muslims. And some people actually think of him as a hero, but he didn't really help. And it did get the folks at the Hebron sites some rights to the mosque or the Tomb of the Patriarch. But long term, it's not a solution, right? I mean, it's resistance, but there's a way to go about resisting it. The way my approach is a very slow one. It's through educating people and avoiding conflict and violence. It's going to take time. When Salahuddin Ayyubi came to Jerusalem, okay, he stood outside and he came in and he didn't want to expel anybody, but he didn't just get up and go. I mean, he had to go through 10 years of education. So there's education that needs to happen, and only then can you have any sort of armed resistance, right? I mean, because the Israeli narrative is that, oh, look, we gave Gazans their liberty, and look, rockets are being thrown at us. And if we give West Bankers the same liberty, you're going to have rockets thrown at us. So I, 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 I empathize with you. I see your frustration, but I don't see killing of any civilians is gonna get you anything more than brownie points and some sympathy and hatred on one side towards the other.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so to get back to your question of peace, how does peace look to me? Um, I think that's two parts. I think
I mean, how
I
would the
think
peace
there's
look like to you in the Holy Land? Like,
in the Holy Land. Yeah, I think in the short term, there needs to be a a um, there needs to be more education about the federal option, the federal solution that's designed by Rafi Gassel and several others, his friend Zahir, whose last name I don't know, and I believe Jason Damuna was consulted in the construction of that document. It's a document that resembles some parts of the American federal system, some parts of the Canada federal system, um, and and I've just listed two imperfect uh, imperfect settler colonial nations, but no nation is perfect. No nation, you know, the greatest nation in the world, America, it's not perfect. You know, China's not perfect. Russia's not perfect. England is not perfect. They can't even decide if they want to be a member of the Eurozone or not. You know, so there's no perfection. There's only moving forward. There's only working our best to create something better for the next generation. So peace to me looks like, in the long term, federal solution. Um, you know, sometimes for the short term, I bounce back and forth between what I think is the best path. Though I do think that federal one state, one state solution with representative government is the best. I think that two states for the short term, while we work on progressing the federal solution, work on, because it's so new, not very many people know about it. Just doing the PR necessary to achieve the consent of the governed for a federal solution. Um, uh, sometimes I think two state is the way to go. How exactly that would look, I don't know, because it's it's very troubling on in the eyes of security-minded Israelis to allow a possibly belligerent state to exist in the West Bank, especially belligerent if it's run by Hamas, which could happen if they hold elections, unfortunately. Um, and they view that more threatening than a Lebanon or a Syria, uh, because it's a high ground in the cradle of their heartland. So you can set up mortars and rockets in the West Bank and hit basically anywhere in Israel, or at least any of the population centers. Maybe you can't hit Eliat, or you can't hit the Golan, maybe from the West Bank. But I think that's the concern about two states among the security-minded Israelis, and maybe the security apparatus in Israel in general. But ultimately, so I'm not always so sure on concrete solutions for the short term. But I think that in the long term, the most just is a federal solution, so that people Palestinians who want to live in Jaffa can live in Jaffa. They want to live in Haifa, they can live in Haifa. Jews who want to live in Hebron can live in Hebron, Shechem, and Nablus. And if they want to live in Ramallah, they can live there. Jericho, if a Palestinian Christian wants to live in Nazareth, absolutely, I love it. That's it's for it's for the whole population. And I think that the way to achieve that is, again, by educating, spreading the information on the federal solution, and working together, and not, I understand from one of the last episodes that I saw with Adar that his guest I think his name was Bassan, said that normalization only serves Jews, and because there's no reason for the Israelis to to change anything, that even communicating with them a is a detriment and is pointless. I disagree with that totally, though I respect that he came to that conclusion through a lot of study and deep thought. I definitely respect his position. I think that the PR campaign is the biggest step in the right direction right now. So I think that Palestinians need to work on their PR with Israelis. Israelis need to work on their PR with Palestinians, and this community is a great place to work on that. However clumsy we may be in our jubilant and youthful implementation of these conversations.
So in federation, you mean, is it going to be like one federation, river to the sea, with different states in it, and the states have certain
Yes,
autonomy?
yes. So to be more specific, the federal plan, it's called Eretz Ard,
Mm-hmm.
and it's I forget exactly how many states. I can't touch my phone to look for the document right now, um, but it's a certain number of states with uh, equal amounts of Jewish majority states to Palestinian majority states,
Mm-hmm.
and then several states that have mixed population. I mean, all of the states have mixed populations already. They just do. Um, but there would be several states that have a large majority of Jews and an equal amount of states that have a large majority of Palestinians. And it would be like in the Canadian system, where if you want to live in a
Ah,
state,
yeah.
you would have to apply to live in that state. When you immigrate to Canada and you want to live in British Columbia, you petition the British Columbian Authority to live in that state, as well as the federal Canadian government to become a citizen. So if you want to live in Hebron, you petition the government of Hebron. I'm sure they would be delighted to have you. Just as if you want to live in Haifa, petition the government of Haifa, they would say, absolutely, we would love to have you. Um, part of that federal solution would be a a right of return for Palestinians that matches the Hebrew right of return, the Jewish right of return.
Mm-hmm.
So before Corona, there was, I think it was about 30,000, maybe a little bit more, Jews immigrating to the land every year. That would resume, and there would be even more. There would be 30,000 Palestinians, uh, coming to the land, and I think that would be amazing. And in fact, even when I was very anti-Israel, very disdainful for the state, I still have my severe criticisms for the state. I'm just a little bit more nuanced in how I approach it, because I again see myself as possibly having to make use of that 1970 law, uh, if uh, if worse comes to worse in American politics. Um, but oh man, I just lost myself. My dog walked by and
No, you were on
distracted
the
me.
right track. You were on the track for, because that's what I was trying to get
Yeah,
going
I
into
remember
it.
now. I
Mhm.
remember now. Even when I was very anti-Israel, I would say to people, I would say to Jews who asked me, and I would say to Palestinians who asked me, I would go to that. I would consider making Aliyah, immigrating, becoming a participating member of the society, if Palestinians could do the same. Because I grew up in a neighborhood with Palestinians, with Kurds, with Syrians, with Turkish people, and and it never made sense to me that it could only be Jews who had a right to the land. It just made sense to me that Jews have a particular need for immigration under duress that many other populations don't always experience. Thank you for letting me gather myself.
What's up, guys?
What's up?
You want to do some audience questions?
Let's do it. Let's do
Yeah.
it.
There's a lot of back
Cool.
and forth in the audience. A lot of discussions going on
That
there.
just means it's a regular day.
Two of my favorites, Or and Yusuf.
Yeah, I didn't know Or. I
Appreciate
mean, Or is born in East Jerusalem, he said. Interesting.
So chat, start asking some questions, maybe even some super chats. Always greatly appreciated. Of course, we will try to get to as many questions as possible, but super chats are always prioritized. I had an interesting thought right before going live that, Nate, where did you say you were born?
I was born in the West Village on occupied Lenape and Canarsie land.
Cool. So New York.
New York City, the city of
So-
immigrants.
Oh yeah.
And Zishan was born in Pakistan. So you are much closer to where he was born, and he is much closer to where you were born.
They were each,
Exactly.
hundreds of miles away from those spaces. Still closer though. Yeah.
Still a few thousand miles closer. So
Yeah.
Yeah. In India and Pakistan, there is no right of return. There is
Yeah.
you hardly get a visa if you're from one side and want to go to the other.
Mm,
Forget
Yeah,
about the right
yeah.
of return. There's no there's no such thing as
Yeah.
even that. I looked into go to India and I needed a sponsor and all of that. I'm like, I don't want to be asking people for that. But anyways, that's a different topic.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a sponsor myself. Luckily my wife's father is a college professor, retired, and in fact her mother also her mother comes from a line of government workers. So I definitely also needed a sponsor. Yeah. India is a very unique place for it's one of the only countries, if not the only country, where there is no documented official persecution of Jews. There might have been individual
Interesting.
incidents, and of course there were bombings in the 70s of the Jewish community in Mumbai, but in general there was no government sponsored or tacit government approval of persecution of Jews in this country. So it's very interesting. But on the other hand, there is absolutely government sponsored and tacit government approval of persecution of Muslims. In fact, when I was getting married in the very beginning of 2020, there were a ton of protests against the citizenship bill that says you can get Indian citizenship without specific documents if you are Hindu, Sikh, Jain, Buddhist, not Muslim. And these documents that people need, these are you're the type of people that first of all wouldn't be registered already because they weren't born in government or private hospitals. They were born, in their village. These are poor people, people with varying levels of literacy. They do not have these documents. And likewise, at the same time, there was a literal pogrom against Muslims, and I believe it was in Delhi, where over 50 people were killed. Many of them burned alive in their homes. So it's a very bizarre place. I don't live anywhere near Delhi, so I didn't feel I didn't see any of that going on, and the state that I live in doesn't have the political party that that sort of stokes these anti-Muslim emotions. So I'm very thankful for that for where I live in this part of the country.
Awesome. So we have a question from Gil Kaufman. Gil asked, this is for you, Nathan. Is it true that the word ashram, meaning tent or gathering place, is derived from the word Abraham after he sent his sons to the east?
I'm not familiar with I mean, I am a yoga teacher, but I was more interested in it from a physical perspective than a, uh, a subcontinent cultural perspective. I never learned Sanskrit. I only learned the names of the poses in Sanskrit, so I did learn that much. But so I'm not familiar with the root of the word. I don't know if it's a Dravidian language word, if it's an Indo-Iranian word, or what. I don't know. But I do know that Southern Indian languages have a lot of words crossed over with Hebrew. They have ma. Oh, excuse me. Ma is what in Hebrew and Chinese. Um, it can be used in Tamil. You say inama, like what is that? It doesn't all ma doesn't always mean what though in Tamil. And then there's ba, come, po, here. So there's connection. I'm just not sure about ashram, that specific word.
Yeah, I'll.
Would you know, Zishan or
Yeah,
Adar?
I don't know about
Well,
the
actually,
root.
I just looked it up, so we have Google on our side.
Yeah, I mean it just means orphanage. But I don't know the root of the word.
Oh, ashram is another word for orphanage as well.
Hmm. I mean,
Interesting. Okay.
I mean, it depends on. Sometimes they use ashram. Typically they say anad ashram, which is orphanage for the kids. That's how they use it. But the specific root of the word ashram, I don't know.
Yeah. So
Well, it's
here
a
it
house where
says
you're doing God's work, so it kind of makes sense.
here it says the ashram derives from a Sanskrit word srama, which means religious exertion. So,
Okay.
and then later in the 20th century, English speakers broadened the term ashram to encompass any sort of religious retreat, regardless of denomination. So, it seems like it's not connected to Abraham. And this is actually something that most religions, most nations, most people who take a lot of pride in a certain aspect of their identity, they kind of try to claim ownership and credit over way more than what they actually deserve ownership or credit for. And one of the clearest examples we see this with is food. You'll have like talk to the Turkish and the Greeks how they fight over like what the doner or is it hero, right? Which one is it? The yogurt. This they're going to fight over every food. They both think they invented it, and this could be replicated in many different countries around the world who are battling each other over ownership of food, as if that food being of your nationality somehow increases like your intrinsic value as a human. It obviously doesn't, but we still take pride in it. So I've seen this done with Judaism as well, where people try to like extend the reach of Judaism to say that Buddhism was also a result of meeting Abraham's sons when they went east. I haven't seen anything to back it up. Judaism certainly has had a great impact um, by turning into Christianity and then Islam from that. I mean, being the it's not the first monotheistic religion, but it's considered the one from which Islam and Christianity came from. But yeah, we don't need to just try. What's going on? Oh, what others on camera? Yeah. So, anyways, Judaism certainly has had an impact, but a lot of the claims about like the influence on yoga and Eastern stuff, I've heard a bunch of claims. I haven't seen any of that substantiated.
Yeah, I mean, and there are instances where these types of things do happen. For example, yoga is a major influence, as well as Buddhism, on the Shaolin monastery. The type of martial arts that the Shaolin monks do is very much influenced by yoga, and in fact, their existence as warrior monks, according to their history, is that a monk from India came, and they were before that monk came, they were monks who only practiced reading scriptures and meditation and breathing exercises. They didn't do any exercises. And this traveling monk from India noticed that they weren't even physically capable of doing their daily chores, bringing water from the river, sweeping up. They would be tired from them. So he said, here, do these exercises every day, and you'll be able to easily carry water. You'll be able to easily clean the monastery, and you'll have energy left over to do other good deeds, which is the basis of yoga. It's bettering yourself so that you can become a more efficient part of your community, so that you can do good deeds, so that you can, help prepare the world. So these crossovers absolutely do happen, but not everyone is a crossover. Sometimes it's just words sound the same because there's only so many sounds in existence.
Yep. This is actually an interesting one. First of all, real quick super chat for Mutt. Thank you so much for the €5. Is that euros? Yeah.
Looks like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I already had answered my question about Sfaradim in Israel. This is just to support the show. I sometimes lose faith in humanity. This show helps fix it. Thank you so much, Fremont. I really love getting messages like that. So this is actually an interesting evolution to our conversation about Judaism's far-reaching influence on the East, which I haven't seen, again, anything substantiated, but this is kind of interesting. What about Abraham and Sarah versus Brahma and Saraswati? So I don't know much about Eastern religions, but a quick Wikipedia tells me Brahma is one of the principal deities of Hinduism. Though his importance has declined in recent centuries, he is also referred to as Svabhum. I guess that's less relevant, but Brahma is like one of the original deities, and his wife was named Saraswati. That's awfully similar to Abraham and Sarah. Similar enough that it should definitely we should look into that. That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
We do know that a lot of stories, for example, like the Noah's Ark story. There's been hundreds of great flood stories from different societies all across the globe, spanning thousands of years. So is that just the fact that there was a great flood at a point and many different cultures wrote about it in their words, perhaps? But yeah, it's interesting. What we do know is that a society having stories is very much part of what makes them uniquely human. You're not going to find a society that doesn't have mythology and stories and some kind of belief. But belief in the non-physical world is very much a part of being a human, for good and for bad. Any more questions? Gil asked, who invented the falafel ball?
Moses.
Falafel
We could give that one to Abraham. Let's give that one to
Abraham. You're right, Abraham. Yeah. So it's actually Iraqi. The correct the original version is from what was once Ur, so lower river valley of Iraq.
There you go. So the people of that land.
Al-Ram goes, Hindus could claim the other way around. Yeah, I mean, the claim could be made that Brahma and Saraswati were the original. It'd be interesting to see the years of when those stories arose. Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe a more sinister way of looking at it is there was this group of people, call them the global elite, 4,000 years ago. And they said, you know what, we need religion to control people. So here's like a set of stories that we're going to all go to our respective corners of the world, and we're just going to spread these to our people. So one had the Abraham and Sarah, another one had this. I know I'm getting into dangerous territory and potentially inflaming a lot of people. It's it's me being playful. Don't take me too seriously, but I guess that's a fair explanation as well. Talking about religion might be more contentious than even talking about Israel Palestine.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
And
that's why as an
showing
agnostic, I kind of just steer clear. It's not my fight, but yeah,
But I think it's all there are also aspects that'll bring us together. When um 1492, right, when the Muslims, and I made a mention of this, when they were kicked out of the Iberian Peninsula, they came and lived in North Africa and the Promised Land, and that was one time. Well, they were living peacefully there, and then when the Crusaders came in, the Muslims were and the Muslims and the Jews were fighting together, and the religious significance of Temple Mount, Masjid al-Aqsa, and the Ibrahimi Mosque and the Tomb of the Patriarchs would bring people together, knowing the religious significance. So there's a lot that uh, the religions share.
sure. Tomorrow I'm actually hosting an in-person debate. I was this group called the Israel-Palestine Peace Forum's putting on this little event in Jerusalem. It's like a full-day little peace conference with lectures and workshops, and they're going to have a debate, and I'm going to be moderating it, which is exciting. It's going to be my first in-person moderation. It's a 3v3, and the topic is religion an obstacle to peace? So I have some opinions on it now, but I imagine 24 hours from now I'm going to be much more well informed on the topic. So I'd be happy to share insights after that. And if the internet connection there is good, it'll be live streamed to this channel. So 4 p.m. Jerusalem time. No guarantees until I get there and check internet connection, but I'm going to try. So
Nice.
cool, fantastic.
any other questions you guys see you want me to pull up?
A very important one. Not a question, but a statement from Elias Njetsky just now.
QCat.
Most recent. Oh yes.
Yeah,
QCat you have there.
yeah. He's a mix though. He actually, we spent a lot of time together. I've had him for over 2 years now. So he'll play with me when I'm sleeping. He'll be by me. So he's my buddy. Thank you.
Yeah,
Cats are pretty
fantastic.
cool.
Fantastic.
Yeah, some people say cats are selfish, but I said, well, so are you, right? That's just a human trait. Like now he
Yeah,
wants me to play with him.
Read The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. It
Oh,
explains how all organisms are working in their own best interest, even if they do something seemingly altruistic. For example, so why care about another person? Generally speaking, so like a show of empathy, that seems altruistic, but a show of empathy is generally something that exists amongst pack animals. And it's because you are only as strong as your pack. So to help keep a tribesman or someone in your pack alive is going to increase your chance of survival. If the pack is weakened, then you have a chance of dying yourself. So that's really where it comes from. Another example is why do birds fly in huge groups? It's not that they love each other per se. It's that when they're in a large group, there's less of a chance of any individual in that group being attacked by like an eagle or something. So
yeah,
I
exactly.
forget who it was who said. I saw it in a meme today, so it's probably totally incorrect, and I'm forgetting the name too. So it's even less important. But I remember that it was a famous woman scientist who said, supposedly, according to this meme in her college class, that in her opinion, the beginning of civilization wasn't at the advent of writing or farmers or tool use. It was at the point you can find in the fossil record of people with broken femurs having their femur, having demonstrated that their femur refused, that they lived after that event, that trauma of the femur breaking, that's when humans became civilized, which puts it easily back 2 to 3 million years. Honestly, if you want, if you want to ask me.
Interesting.
Yeah, I heard about that. That's fascinating. And just that doesn't mean that empathy isn't an important and beautiful thing just because its origins are selfish. A lot of things that we developed in order to survive are now beautiful parts of our life today. So we don't need that idea that everything is inherently selfish shouldn't make us nihilistic. The world is still beautiful, even recognizing that to be true. So. Um,
I don't see Mossad here anymore, but he was on earlier. I was saying, oh, more leftist talk, uh, but I don't think it's all leftist or rightist. I mean, it's about doing the right thing for the people in the land. And there were some questions around Israel isn't doing anything to achieve the two-state solution. I mean, initially I was for the two-state solution, but if you actually think about it from a logistics and implementation ID passport perspective, you have the West Bank and the Gaza. How will you deal with transportation and security amongst those two states? And they're run by and could be run in the future by different regimes. And the people in the two states wouldn't get to go to the beach, nor will they get to see Jaffa or their homeland or etc. And recently, there's been an increase in the number of applications for Israeli citizenship from East Jerusalem. So, what are you going to do with the people, the Palestinians who are now Israeli citizen? Do you take them in? Do you leave them out? Or there are lots of logistical challenges in doing the two-state. There's a lot to lose. Um, I don't know where there'll be peace though, because if you're ever kicked out of, um, I'll use this as an example. Shiloach, Nehelat Shimon. If you're ever kicked out of there and you're a descendant, or your dad was there, or your grandfather was there, you wouldn't like it, right? You would hate it. If you're kicked out of from Jaffa, you would hate it, and then you could never go back. So the moment you separate out and make it a separate country, you can't really go back. And I think if you look at the two states, right, India and Pakistan, Bangladesh, they became, so India and Bangladesh were one country, east and west. That didn't work out. So anytime you divide up a country into multiple pieces, I think you're losing a lot more than you gain. And as about peace, I don't think you would have peace though, because you would still want to see your house in Jaffa, which you cannot see. You'd still want to see your house in Silwan, which you cannot see. You'd still want to go to the Tomb of the Patriarchs or Ibrahimi Mosque or Temple Mount. You still want to, like, if you go from West Bank to Jerusalem, you won't be able to do that, right? You won't be able to go to Temple Mount. You'd need a permit. Or if you are a Jew, you want to come to Hebron, you'd need a permit. So I don't think there'll be peace though. You won't like that situation. It's gonna continue the hatred. I mean, look at Pakistan and India. That's a great example of what was left behind. And like looking at the history, one side hates Jinnah, but when I looked at the history, he was actually asking for continuous pieces of land and states with certain autonomy. And they had a disagreement. They agreed in 1940, but then I think it was Nehru who said there was that this trust or this delegation that was set up that said you get this continuous states with certain autonomy. We don't really have to follow it. He said, well, okay, then screw you. I'll get my own country. But did it? I can't really go to my ancestral homeland without getting some sort of sponsorship, and at that point I might have to report to a police station in every city. I don't like it. I mean, not that I want the land back. I want to be able to visit. So I don't think you're going to get a kumbaya. I think the hatred is going to continue with a two-state solution.
Yeah, certainly. And there's quite a few people who wouldn't see a two-state solution as like you said, as just for either side. There's somebody who oh my, I hope Adar is doing good. There's people
I think someone
in
isn't liking the two-state solution discussion.
yeah. I hope Adar is doing okay. Everyone pray for Adar. Um, there's like you said, there's people who want to be able to go to Haifa. They want to be able to go to the beach. There's people in Gaza who want to go to Hebron. All of that. It's not. It's quite simply, in the long run, not at all enough. The two-state solution. Maybe it's maybe it's part of a framework for moving to the federal. But you said a good point that bringing two states together is very hard, and maybe the two-state would be the wrong path towards a federal solution. So maybe.
Yeah, and you look at where two states were created and what the situation is right now. Is it helping? I don't think so. Um,
Yeah.
there are many examples of um, where the state was broken up into multiple pieces, and now it's still a problem. So I always go to back to the situation on the ground, right? So let the people live where they are, and if they're applying for Israeli citizenship, don't think bad of them. They're just trying to protect themselves. I mean, who wants to leave Jerusalem and not be able to come back? And I think if we had more people who would be like I earlier on, I didn't know that there were Palestinians who had Israeli citizenship. Then I found out there are millions of them,
Yeah.
2.5 million,
Yeah.
and
A
they
large portion.
yeah, and they can't really go to like they can't come to Pakistan or Saudi or many other countries because they hold an Israeli passport. I mean, is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're not coming there for any kind of terrorism or promoting any kind of ideology. They just want to come and visit.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. Maybe
if
they've got family on the other side who ended up in one of those countries.
exactly, so you really got to look at the situation on the ground and how, like, if we had more people saying that I'm from East Jerusalem and I'm Palestinian and Israeli, I think it's gonna ease the tension. Like or is Jewish, right? Or Shalamish. He's from East Jerusalem and he's Jewish, so he would know more about the situation on the ground. Um, but that is, you have so many Palestinians waiting for the citizenship, but once they get it, they can travel freely, they can own land, they have their own laws, and I would even say both sides learn the one side learns Hebrew, the other side learns Arabic. It's not that hard. I mean, shalom, salam. What is ervetor? I mean, simple phrases goes along with.
Anachnu.
Yeah,
Anachnu. Yeah.
yeah. Because I remember there was a good example you brought up for Canada because Quebec has certain autonomy. They control the number of immigrants they take in. They have a language police. If you've got a sign outside that's in English, they'll tell you to make it in French. And you have to know at least some basic French to go there. You can't just
Mhm.
start blabbering in English. They're not going to respond. Quite frankly, I told my friend that ask them nicely, say, "Parlez-vous anglais?" They'll all say yes and then speak to them. So here we are, 2 a.m. He picks up the phone. He's ordering pizza. He's like, "Oh yeah, I would like to get a large pizza with this and this. Oh yeah, and a 2-liter bottle of Coke." And what does the other guy do? He hangs up the phone because they don't like English over there. I said, just, and then, sure enough, he says, "Parlez-vous anglais?" And they all say yes, and things are all okay. It's just one simple sentence. So, I mean, yeah, situation like that where you have states have a certain autonomy, people will be willing. Now, you might not get the leaders of PA or Hamas to agree, but if the people on the ground agree, sure enough, it's going to trickle up.
Yeah. I mean, the leaders of the PA and Hamas, they're already not entirely representative in everything they do, especially, you can see it now in the protests in the West Bank. It's just a question of showing the people that there is a different way, being specific about about the solutions, and not leaving the specifics up to up to the political leaders. Instead, having the people say, these are specific things that we want, these are specific things that we feel we need and can't negotiate, these are specific things that we are absolutely willing to negotiate on, and go from there, as opposed to just letting one strong man go to represent 7 million people or 5 million people, or so on and so forth. There's it's it's a world with so much opportunity for learning, and our populations are among the most educated in the world as well. Certainly the most educated in the region. So it's totally within our capacity to learn specifics of what we want and to advocate for them.
Yeah, I agree. Um, yeah, I had
Do you guys want to move it to the Discord for an after party?
Sure, I'd be delighted to.
yeah, I gotta run. Gotta get back to. No,
All good. So Natan will join us. Final thoughts? Disha, Natan, final thoughts, and then we'll move it to the after party.
Final thoughts would be, thank you very much, Adar, for hosting us. Thank you, Zishan, for joining me and for asking such amazing questions and providing such amazing responses to my questions. Thank you, audience, for being participants in the community. And let's do our work. Let's spread the information to our friends, to somebody who expresses a passing concern about the conflict. I'd say show them the federal proposal. Talk to them about justice for both people, and or even not the federal plan. Show them what you think is the best. Talk to them about what you think justice for both people looks like, and I think that continuing the conversation about it, and not only talking about it when there's rocket fire and children dying, is honestly the best way to work to solve this problem.
no,
Amen.
not
It's been great having you, Natan.
no. This is not at all. Try to make you. Fremont is telling me no. This is not at all. Try
No,
to.
that's a continuation to Fremont O2 dropped a bomb of a statement and then said, "But this isn't me trying to make you late because you said you're in a rush somewhere." But you wanna Fremont goes, I heard in a not so brief history of Palestine that coastal lines of Palestine were strongly underpopulated even under Ottoman Empire because people were afraid of crusaders coming back. Is that accurate? Never heard that, but it's interesting.
I
Yeah,
heard that the Mongols actually did a lot of depopulation in the area, because the area is known for its sort of hillside strongholds, and that's partially why the initial Muslim invasions uh, didn't practice as much settlements as they did in the rest of the Muslim expansions, because they knew that the people had these mountain and hillside and cave strongholds set up that were at that point 1,000 years old already, that they could use to stage active resistance, and that the Mongols and I forget which Khanate ruled over the land after the partition of the Mongol Empire, that they were very fond of depopulation in the area because it was a land that liked to rise up against their rule from time to time. That's just what I've heard.
Yeah. Oh, there's another question from me. Maybe Pakistan or Shalom can. Is that how I pronounce it? I'm probably mispronouncing. He's saying that maybe Pakistan can open the doors to Israelis and vice versa. Actually, Pakistanis, as a Pakistani citizen, you can still visit Israel. A little known fact, I don't know if people know here. So even if if you have a passport that's Pakistani, it says not valid for Israel, you can still travel to Israel. The Israeli consulate will give you a visa. That it's not going to be stamped on the passport. You would take it. It's a separate page. You take that to the border. The Israeli border authorities, they no longer stamp any passport, even if it's American or any. They'll give you a card. So the only trouble you'll have is if you're in Pakistan, there is no Israeli embassy, but you can go to Dubai because there's an embassy now over there, and Dubai allows Pakistanis to enter very freely. So you can go to an Israeli embassy and get a Israeli visa and fly directly to Tel Aviv. So any passport that says not valid for Israel, um, it is still valid, and Israel will let you fly in. Vice versa, yeah, I hope that Israelis can go there. Um, it's more of a, uh, it's more of a it's more of symbolism of not accepting Israel, right? I think you don't get the airspace and you don't recognize Israeli passport. But I think on the other level, it's still like, for example, as Pakistani citizens, you want to go to Aqsa, you'll have to go through Israeli checkpoint. So they can go. It's a little known fact, but I didn't really know Muslims went to Jerusalem or went to the land in the past, but last year after I bought the ticket, I told people that I'm going there. I was surprised to see so many people who had visited the land. They just weren't vocal about it because they thought you might think of them as different, but um, it's okay. I mean, you should visit it, see what's going on. You will like it. But last thought, sorry.
Yeah, final thoughts, Zishan.
So if you notice, there were, deliberately I kept my tone in a certain way, and I didn't really go into the 1948 war, 68 war, Yom Kippur war, and things like that, and massacres and killing. I hope that the Muslims and the people who are watching is what they're able to understand is there is a way to have dialogue with the opposite side. I mean, I could have started off saying that Israel is illegally occupying West Bank and Gaza, and they need to leave right away, uh, but but it's the way you go about explaining the situation to the other side. I mean, I think focus on the situation on the ground and have concrete solution. If you have a law that you want to talk against or you have a specific issue, focus on that as opposed to try to be constructive in your criticism, um, as opposed to destructive. Because I think yelling, screaming, killing each other has gotten us nowhere in 70 years, and I don't think it'll get us anywhere in the next 70 years. So, be accepting of the criticism. Like when I hear a settler's opinion, I mean, I feel that there is no hope. Uh, but then when I hear, shows such as Adar, and I know I forget the exact statement, but there were some statements that I heard from Adar was like that if the right were to hear him, they would just expel him or boycott him. But he did, and I give him props for saying that. So when you hear people saying the same things, similar things that you are, so you should also be open to debating in a way that's acceptable.
Amen, brother. Amen. Final thought. Gil Kaufman leaves a comment, which I appreciate. Gil goes, Adar, remember to remind everybody about becoming a Sulha patron and make donations to keep these conversations going. Yeah, you know what, Gil? That's a good idea. All right, I appreciate that comment. If anybody does want to support the show, first of all, just by watching it, you're supporting it. just by being a community member, you're supporting it. So don't feel like you're by any means have to donate or are pressured to do so. Any support is greatly appreciated. But it is true that our donations we get on PayPal and our patrons certainly help us do what we're doing. The idea is to just continue to grow and continue to expand until the whole world loves one another. And if we don't achieve that, at least we achieved some amount of that, some amount of reconciliation, right? It's not all about one person, one group doing it. It's about everybody doing their small part to positively impact the world. And if we all collectively live life with that approach, then the world will be a better place. So that's really what we're trying to do. Thank you all again. We are going to have an after party in Discord. I'm going to drop a link to Discord in the chat. If you want to join the after party, you join our Discord on the left-hand side. It says lounge, click lounge, and you'll be connected. You could speak. You don't have to. You could just listen, but it'll be a nice little chat. And that's it, friends. Tomorrow, again, we might have we have an in-person debate in Jerusalem. If the internet connection there is good, I will live stream it. If not, we won't have a live stream tomorrow. But a few interesting ones next week. So see you soon, friends.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Thank you.